because we're gonna move through a little bit of material here, and I need you guys to talk to me today, because I want to make sure that I am being absolutely clear in what I am not only saying, but assigning. And so with the hypothesis assignment that was due last week, I have about 10 students across all 3 discussions that turned in hypotheses that were not associated with the compost project. And that's a big red flag for me, because that's what we've been talking about for 3 weeks now. And so I don't know where the disconnect is at. And so I need you guys to talk to me just a little bit. Do you feel like the assignments are clear on what you need to turn in? Not necessarily how to do it, right? Because I want you to struggle with that piece a little bit, but the end result, like what you need to turn in. So that's what I want to know. Is that clear for the most part?
Yes, it's pretty clear.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. And Alejandro. Okay, if it's not, I need you guys to step up and ask questions, because there's 75 of you in this class across 3 different discussions. And so it's just like me teaching lab. Like I got to make sure that everybody in the first discussion or the first lab is getting what the third discussion and the third lab is. And I've got my notes and stuff, but it's, and I try to follow them pretty closely, but sometimes there can be a little bit of a disconnect. All right, so yes, Daphne, no problem. All right, so what we are going to talk through today is not only that hypothesis assignment, but we're going to start like actually with the research project. We've already started thinking about some background. You guys have heard my lectures about justifying the project and why that is the way that it is and the different challenges that we have. We're slowly starting to filter down into what our research hypotheses are going to be. And that was the point of the assignment last week. And so for the most part, the hypotheses were great. If you guys didn't get full points on that, it's because sorry, there's chat stuff going on. Tyler, you're fine. We're fine. It's because there wasn't an alternative hypothesis, a null hypothesis, and or you didn't identify the independent variable, dependent variable, or experimental unit. If you guys had the objective in there, that was fine. We're going to do more objective work today because that is a really key piece to this process. It's actually the sentence or series of sentences that go in the paper. And so the hypothesis really helps us take that research question that we have and put it into a testable format. And then the hypothesis is then translated into an objective. And I've got a slide that is going to help with that process as well. So if you didn't get full points on that hypothesis assignment, chances were you were missing one of those 5 major elements: null, alternative, independent, dependent, or experimental unit. If you got 0 points, you may have had all of those components, but it wasn't about this project, this compost project. And so that's why I was asking about clarity in the assignment. And so you guys just got to communicate with me. If you are unsure, please send me an email, or we'll get on and do office hours. I've been doing just office hours by appointment the last week with several people, and it's worked out really well. So please just make sure that you are staying up to date with that stuff. So Johnny, yes, you can still, you guys with assignments, you can still turn them in even though we're 72 hours after, actually 72 hours. because we shifted it today because of Blackboard. 72 hours is tomorrow night, Tuesday. So you could still get up to 70% of the points if you guys get that hypothesis assignment in today. After that, it defaults to the late policy in the syllabus, okay? And I'm starting to get a little bit tired of saying this as well. Stop asking me if you guys can turn stuff in late, okay? It's in the syllabus. I've got it structured so that if you're within 3 days, you only get 90 to 70% of the points. If you're after that, you get half the points, and everything's got to be in by dead week, Friday of dead week, okay? So as always, please check the syllabus before you ask me those questions, because I'm getting them a lot and it's hard to answer them 75 individual times. Okay, with that, for all intents and purposes, for the rest of this class, through the rest of the semester, I have not had anybody reach out about individual research projects. So meaning that you're working with another faculty member in the College of Ag, or I may have had one person, I can't quite remember. And so that, I think I had one person. So with the majority of the people are going to be doing this research project. Okay, so that is what your individual research project is, this compost project. Okay, I just want to make sure that that is clear. So the research paper that we're going to be drafting is going to be based on the compost project. The data that we're collecting is on the compost project. The data you analyze will be on the compost project, and how we write up results and discussion will all be on the compost project. All right, so I hope that that is clear. And if not, you guys, please let me know. All right, I am going to switch to Blackboard really quickly. Let's just look at this week's module. There's a lot of stuff going on. Hopefully more of that is going to make sense after today. And then we're going to switch to a PowerPoint and talk through some hypotheses, objectives, and terminology. Okay, so one last question. Can you turn in hypotheses with made adjustments? No, I'm sorry, guys. Once it's turned in, that's the thing that gets graded. All right, so go back to our homepage. We are in week 5. So crazy. It's going so fast. All right, with week 5, you kind of have a list of what is going on. The first announcement is that no new lecture material this week. Okay, so there's no videos to watch. There's no quiz to take on the videos. There is a quiz to take. Okay, so this is that point in the semester that I feel like you guys are starting to get majorly stressed. We're running in to the first set of midterms and other classes. And so it has been my experience that it goes better if I back material off for this week and we switch our focus to writing. And so with that writing assignment is this research paper assignment. And so I am not going to spend my time today going through and reading through this entire research paper assignment, because that is something that you guys will do this week. And then you will go in and take this research or this comprehensive quiz about this assignment. There is a lot of detail in the assignment. Okay, so there's lots of details in how we write peer-reviewed journal articles. If I'm submitting to Journal of Animal Science, there is an 11-page document that tells me what my font has to be, what my margins have to be, what my all the instructions that an author needs to know. And so this research paper assignment reads similarly to that instructions to authors. So it's not super long. The rubrics are also in there for all 4 parts, but you do need to read it, study it, and take a comprehension quiz. This is a timed quiz. All right. We are getting ready to move into, we're basically a little less than 2 weeks away from turning in part 1 of the research paper assignment. So here's an example of part 1, if you guys need a reference, and I will also copy this back to the research project module. So everything is in one spot or more than one spot. All right, the third assignment that was not included in the email, I just developed because I've been going through these hypotheses, and for the most part, you guys as a class are ready to move on to the next step, which is taking your hypotheses into objectives. And so we're going to detail that out a little bit more today as time allows. We may even run into breakout rooms to try to develop some of those objectives. So this assignment here is new. It's not in the email. Okay, so please just be aware of it. So what you're going to do, very similarly to last week, where you turned in the null and alternative sets of hypotheses, 2 to 4 of them, and you also identified independent variable, dependent variable, and experimental unit. You're going to do all that again, and you're going to create an objective for each set of hypotheses. Okay, so this assignment is getting bigger. This assignment is worth 15 points instead of 10 points because we're adding more material. And it's due end of day Friday. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Can they be like the same topics that we did previously, or do they have to be new hypotheses?
Great question, Steph. Thank you for asking. So the new hypotheses is what I want you guys to use. And so I'm gonna break down how you guys interpreted the hypotheses and then how I'm morphing them. So by the end of today, you will have the official null hypotheses for the project. So use those as your basis, okay? You can develop the alternative ones, and then you can take that into the objective. Does that answer your question?
So you're giving us a null hypotheses that each one of us is going to use for the paper.
Yep.
And then okay. And then so for the paper, we're doing it individually, and then we just kind of create our own alternative.
Yep.
Okay.
And objective.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Great questions. All right. The last assignment that is due this week is kind of, I'm calling it a pre-part 1. So I want you guys to start thinking about getting part 1 turned in on October 1st, Friday, October 1st. So to get to that point, this assignment is, I'll download it so we can look at it together. It can be a little bit confusing, so I want to make sure that we are all on the same page and that I can answer any questions you have. So it's opening up. There we go. Okay, so this is what that pre-part 1 assignment looks like. So this is kind of the scaffolding of the outline. This is what I am expecting your guys' outlines that you're turning in December 1st for part 1 to look like. Okay, so you can ignore the project or you can just type it in here. It's going to be the compost project. Okay, so each section, each big section here, so this is like section 1, here's section 2, section 3, 4, and 5. These you can think of as individual paragraphs in the very beginning of your research paper. So you guys are drafting the outline for the introduction section of your paper with this assignment. All right, so the parts highlighted in yellow are what's due on Friday. So I want you guys to know your project, which you already know, it's the compost project. I want you guys to do some research and some lit searching about a hook sentence. Okay, and so with the hook sentence, please, everybody, listen and pay attention to this. I'm going to tell you how to make points on this section. A hook sentence is the most effective when statistics are used and cited. So for example, a really bad hook sentence is saying that something like food security is going to be a large problem in 2050 with 9.4 billion people. Okay, that's an example of a poor hook statement. Yeah, it kind of grabs the reader, but it doesn't give any statistics about it. Saying something to the effect of, it has been estimated that there will be a 25% food shortage by 2050 with an increasing population of 9 billion. That is more effective. Okay, so having statistics as a part of that hook sentence is definitely more effective. If you don't want full points for that part of the rubric, go ahead, use whatever hook sentence you want. If you want full points, try to incorporate some statistics in there. Just remember to cite your source at the end of that sentence, just like we do in APA format. All right, so this is the introduction to the lit review section. All of this right here is going to be like paragraph 1 of your paper. Okay, so scaffold it out. Okay, build it out. What's the hook sentence going to be? What is the in-text citation look like for the hook statement? Again, we're using APA format. Okay, what are the 1 to 2 points that are going to work into 1 to 2 to 3 sentences to bridge your hook sentence into the thesis statement for your literature review? All right, and then the last sentence of that introduction paragraph is always going to be the thesis sentence of your literature review. Okay, so your thesis sentence is really essential because it is going to provide a roadmap to your reader for what they can expect to read in the next 3 paragraphs. All right, so let me think about this for just a second. I'll give you an example. I don't want to give you a compost example. Oh, I'll use last year's project. So last year we looked at blood mineral components in cattle that were grazing at different locations. And so the thesis statement was something like, oh, I should have pulled an example. Was something like the objective of this literature review is to investigate the importance of selenium, copper, and magnesium in the beef cattle diet. And then theme A was all about selenium, theme B was all about copper, and theme C was all about manganese. Okay, so again, your thesis sentence comes at the end of your first paragraph in your introduction section and serves as the roadmap to the rest of that introduction section. And the rest of that introduction section is what we also call a lit review, because you're going to be reviewing literature and reviewing research that has been done prior to this point. All right, so I want you guys by the end of this week to have a good handle on what your hook sentence is going to be, how you're going to bridge that area between the hook sentence and the thesis statement. And then I want you guys to at least know, you don't have to pull a ton of citations yet, okay, but at least know what theme A is going to be, what theme B is going to be, and what theme C is going to be. Because this is going to make your workload next week a whole lot lighter, because you're going to have some targeted, focused areas that you can go pull literature on. All right, the other piece that I want to make sure that you guys have down this week is the objective of your study. And again, that's gonna be part of your assignment that is due on Friday, that discussion assignment we were just talking about. Okay, and we're gonna work through that today as well. And then of course, references. We're gonna just start building references now. Okay, so if you use them in your paper, just go ahead and put them into APA format in the bottom of this, because we're just gonna keep building each part of the paper we turn in. All right, so that is what is due this week. Okay, so the comprehension quiz of the big research paper assignment, the hypotheses and objectives assignment, and this part 1 assignment, all due on Friday. Any questions about due dates or what is due? Fantastic. Okay. I just put together a really quick PowerPoint today because I want us to review a couple of things, and I'm hoping to bring a little bit more clarity to the research project. So we're gonna look at this hopefully together. We'll see if it does it. Are you guys looking at a big screen, a big slide, or are you looking at the presenter slide?
Presenter.
Okay, thank you. Too many. I'm going to go back to just one screen. I think this is crazy. There we go. All right. Does that look better, Steph?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so as I was grading the hypotheses that you guys submitted, it became really apparent. Most of you guys had not most of you, probably half of you had a really good handle on this terminology. And I could tell the people that went back and reviewed the material from week 2, because that's where this stuff showed up at the first time. So part of the completeness of a hypothesis is that it has an independent variable, a dependent variable, and an experimental unit. And so I just want to go through those 3 terms really quickly again, so that it's fresh in your mind as you guys move into turning in the objectives this week. All right, so an independent variable in the context of research is treatments. Okay, so it is going to be what is applied to the experimental unit. So independent variable and treatments are exchangeable terminology here. So you may hear me say treatments, you may hear me say independent variable, they mean the same thing. Okay, so what it is going to be, what are we going to test? Okay, so it can include a treatment, it can include a control, and it's going to be a variable that is manipulated. All right, so with what we've talked about so far with the compost project, we spent a lot of time last week talking about bone in versus bone out compost process, right? So what would be the independent variable in that research project? What do you think? What are we manipulating?
I would assume having bone and not having a bone in the compost pile.
Exactly. Thank you, Peyton. So the treatment is either bone in or bone out. The independent variable is bone in or bone out. Okay, is everybody clear on that? Just give me a thumbs up. I'm looking at your boxes right now. Great. Okay. All right. So the independent variable is going to be what is manipulated. It's our treatments. The dependent variable is the thing that depends on what we're manipulating. Okay. So these are the traits that we're going to measure. This is the information that we're going to collect. All right. So for example, I think I told you guys last week that we are continually collecting temperatures, right, on these research piles. So temperature is a really good example of a trait or a dependent variable for this research project. Okay, so these variables are going to be things that respond to us manipulating them, okay, or things that respond to our treatments or our independent variable. All right, so give me just to show me some thumbs if you guys are cool with dependent variables. Great, 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 great. Awesome. Thank you guys. Okay, let's go to our last one. You guys can ignore randomization here. We're going to hit that next week when we start talking about principles of experimental design. But an experimental unit is the third piece to hypotheses and objectives. Okay, so the experimental unit is the single most unit that a treatment can be applied to. Another way to think about this is it's the smallest unit that a treatment can be applied to. So if we were feeding a pen of lambs over at the sheep unit, and one pen was getting silage and one pen was getting grain, we would be applying the treatment to a pen of lambs. Okay. Now, if we were individually feeding the lambs and we had lambs that were, or 6 lambs that were housed together in the same pen, but we brought them into feed chambers where they were separated from their buddies and we fed them their specific diet, then that treatment could be applied to individual lambs. Okay, so defining experimental unit is really important because it makes or breaks our statistical analysis when we get to the analysis phase of the process. All right, so again, an experimental unit is the single most unit that a treatment can be applied to, the smallest unit. Okay, so with the compost project, you guys have seen the facilities. You've heard me talk about the 2 treatments that we are going to move forward with. What is the experimental unit?
Would it be the bays that
It
each?
is, yeah, good job. At this point in time, it's the base. All right, so compost mound or compost bay is going to be your experimental unit. All right, experimental unit is probably going to change as we move through the analysis. Okay, but for right now, for all intents and purposes, where you guys are at with your knowledge of research, experimental unit is compost mound or compost bay. All right. So let me back out of here just really quickly. Is everybody comfortable with independent variable, dependent variable, and experimental unit?
When you say experimental unit and you refer to the compost mound, is that the area that the compost is sitting in, or is that the beginning makeup, like the manure and the stuff of the compost itself?
So good question. It is both of those things. And the reason that I say it's both of them is because in compost bay number 2, we have the bone-in material. Whereas in compost bay number 3, we have the bone-out material. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, awesome. Okay, cool. So let me, nope, dang it. I shouldn't have minimized. Now I can't find my, come on. There we go. Dang it, come on, buddy. Okay, are you guys back to looking at the slideshow? I cannot tell. I'm sorry.
I think it's back in the presenter mode.
Dadgum. Okay, thank you. There we go. All right, that should be better. All right, so where are we at with our research project as of today? We are fully moving down the line of the scientific method. So we know our idea, we know our problem, we know the issues that are behind it. Okay, so we are going to move into the literature review and the hypothesis development. And again, research is messy, all right? So these steps don't necessarily happen cleanly in the order that they're presented here. So with the literature review, that is where we're starting prepping for turning in part 1, which is our outline. All right, so the literature review is where you guys are going to go out. You're going to use Google Scholar, not Google, okay? Or you're going to use the library resources. I'm hoping to have somebody from the library to present to you guys next week. They just are having major issues over there and we keep missing each other. But if they can't get here next week, I'm going to take you through lit searching next week. But I'm also assuming that since most of you guys are seniors, you've been at least through a little bit of that in previous classes. So if you don't want to wait until next week, that is a great idea because you need some literature to come up with a hook statement and try to start identifying your big themes to turn in on Friday. And so with the literature review, not only are you collecting background information, but you're also helping to formulate your hypothesis, okay? So this is where you can, these two pieces of the scientific method work hand in hand with one another. So as you find out more and more about what's already been done and published in research, you can cross out or change your hypotheses. Okay, so we are continuing to inform ourselves about what's already done and out there. All right, so that's why we're talking about these two things together. All right, so as we are starting the process of working towards turning in part 1, which is the outline of the introduction section, and we just went through and saw that assignment that's due Friday. Here's what I collected from you guys and the hypotheses that you turned in on Friday. So I went through and read all but about 10 students, and this is really how I was able to kind of sort them. Okay, so there was a lot of people interested in the compost process. So I saw a lot of good hypotheses that were asking questions about like moisture and temperature and pile height and adding bacteria to speed the process up and the actual process of bone in versus bone out material and what the nutrients and stuff look like. And so the compost process hypotheses were well over and above everything else that I saw. But these were the major categories that all of your guys' hypotheses worked into. So there was a couple of species versus species questions, which I do think would be interesting. We just don't have the capacity to do that in this class. But I think, especially on the off-all side, I'm pretty sure we could make that happen with what's coming out of the meats lab. So that's something that I may look at for the rest of the duration of this grant. There was one great hypothesis about water quality and how application of this cured compost material onto like irrigated pasture or anywhere that had the opportunity to, if pathogens were a part of it, could be pulled down into the water table. There was one really great set of hypotheses about that. There were a couple of hypotheses about compost application. And so, which I appreciate, that's absolutely part of this bigger grant. But again, we've got to generate the compost first before we can actually apply it. And so this is going to be a very step-by-step process. And then I could tell who all the pre-vet students are in the class because you guys were all into this whole pathogen, nasty bacteria disease thing, which is kind of cool. And so there were lots of hypotheses around, are pathogens present or not? Is the composting process getting rid of pathogens? Is there any left over? That type of thing, which I love. That is a part of the bigger research project and the bigger grants that we have. Dr. Smith is going to work on some of that stuff for us. But again, right now, I don't have money to do that. And I definitely don't have the expertise to do that. So what this is really going to come down to is we're probably looking at creating hypotheses about the compost process. And so with that, this gets to what Stephanie asked a little bit earlier. I went through your guys' stuff. I looked at the data that we're already collecting, and these are the null hypotheses that I know we can test this semester. All right. So part of this, as much as I would love us to have a year-long class for research where we could really play with a bunch of different hypotheses, we could be on a longer timeline, etc. December is coming quickly. Some of you guys are graduating, so we have to make something, we have to make do and get something done with what the time that we have this fall. All right, so this slide really looks at the process of taking that original research question, which is step one of the scientific method, and getting an objective, which is the step prior to conducting an experiment. And so from our research question, which really in general across all of your hypotheses could be traced back to how does the process of composting differ using bone in versus bone out offal. All right, so that's our research question. The hypotheses null hypotheses that morphed into based on what you guys submitted and the data that we're collecting out at the farm are threefold. So we are testing 3 different sets of hypotheses. I am not going to lie to you guys. This is the biggest endeavor I have ever undertaken in this class, because I think that we're going to probably be looking at 2 statistical analyses, 2 different types of statistical analyses, and about 15 dependent variables. So it's going to be fun. I'm excited. But anyway, so our first null hypothesis in the if-then format. Oh, that's the other thing I need to make a comment about. So in the assignment, the hypothesis assignment you guys turned in last week, a lot of you guys, most of you guys actually didn't morph the hypothesis into the if-then format. You left it in kind of an objective type format. So please go back and do that for full points this week. I wasn't super hard on that, in all honesty. As I was more worried about variables and experimental units. But for this week, please go back and put those hypotheses in an if-then statement. And just really quickly, why do you think we do that? Why is the if-then format important with hypothesis? What do you think?
Because it's a cause and effect type of statement.
Yep. So you're getting their stuff. It's a question, right? Or it's a statement that is testable. All right. So we are creating a statistically testable sentence is what is happening here. And so that's what hypotheses are. And so those hypotheses need to be in an if-then statement. So for example, null hypothesis number 1 states that, and this could use some wordsmithing, okay, I just did them really quickly. If bone in and bone out offall material are used in composting, then there will be no difference in temperature, pile height, and moisture levels during the compost process. Right, so again, if and then. Null hypothesis number 2 states if bone in and bone out offall material are used in composting, then there will be no difference in nutrient compost components of the cured product. All right, and then hypothesis number 3 is where our other type of analysis is going to come into play. We'll learn about that in the next few weeks, but it states the temperature, it's not in the if-then format, it's in a relationship format. And so temperature of the compost mound does not predict height of the compost pile. And so that I could have done a better job with and put it in if-then structure, but you guys can do that because you're good. And I was in a hurry, so. All right, so those are the 3 hypotheses that we're going to use for this class, the 3 null hypotheses. Okay, so basically a third of your assignment that's due on Friday is done. Okay, what you need to do, go in and restructure hypothesis 3 so it's then an if-then statement. Add an alternative hypothesis to each one of these, and then go through and create an objective for each set of hypotheses. So how many objectives should you have in your assignment that you turn in Friday?
Three.
Yep, exactly. Thanks, Tim. So three objectives. Okay, so we create an objective for each set of hypotheses. All right, so hypotheses, objectives, fancy $5 words. What in the world do they mean? If you guys remember this slide from week 2, where we talked about the anatomy of a scientific or peer-reviewed publication, this slide was about halfway down, and it tells you the difference between an objective and a hypothesis. Okay, so our hypothesis is our statistical statement that's usually an if-then format, right? Hypotheses come in pairs, objectives do not. Objectives are the actionable item, okay? So once we create an objective, we can go out and suffice that objective, okay? So hypotheses are not actionable, but objectives are. And the really important part of this whole thing is that objectives are the sentence or the set of sentences that show up as the last sentence in the introduction section of your paper. So let me repeat that again. Objectives are the sentence or the series of sentences that show up in the last paragraph of your research paper, of the introduction section. All right, so just to be super clear, let me pull this assignment back up. All right, so the objective, the 3 objectives that you're going to write are going to go down here in the conclusion section of what's going to be the introduction of your paper. Okay, so now that we've got basically both the assignments kind of covered and we've gone through them that are due on Friday, I need you guys to talk to me for the last 2 minutes. what is the difference between this thesis statement that shows up as the last sentence of the first paragraph versus the sentence or series of sentences that shows up as the last part of the conclusion paragraph? What's the difference?
Isn't the thesis, like, you say what direction you think it would go, as opposed to the objective, which isn't as specific? It just says that there's a difference between the statistics.
You're
would
on the
say-
right track, wrong train. Okay. So the thesis statement refers to your literature review. So keep in mind, we're writing a literature review to justify why we need to do our project, right? Okay, so the reason that we don't have, that your project hasn't been done anywhere else is because of this, this, and this, okay? But you need to collect data as to why your research project is important and why it hasn't been done up to this point. So that is where you organize that information into 3 themes. So the thesis statement is where you provide your reader with a roadmap for the themes. Okay. So I want to be clear with this because this is always a sticking point every semester. And I've taught this class for 8 years. I haven't figured out how to do it better yet. Okay. I'm sure there's a way to do it. I just haven't figured out how. The thesis statement that is a roadmap for your reader goes at the end of the introduction paragraph. The objective of your research project, so that can be one objective or that can be a series of objectives that we just looked at on the previous slide, that goes at the very end of the conclusion paragraph down here. All right. How many people are thoroughly confused? Or are you good?
I just want to make sure I'm clear. So the thesis that you gave us on the one, like the other assignment, are we using that thesis for this one? We're putting that and then making an objective and using, like, they're not, so we're coming up with our own thesis for this one.
Okay.
That one.
Yes. So the thesis statement we haven't talked about at all. I just gave you an example of one with the mineral study where we were looking at the importance of selenium, copper, and manganese. That's just an example. So the thesis statement is what is probably going to be constructed as one of the last pieces of your introduction. And it is providing a roadmap for your reader for your lit review. Nicole, what I think you're talking about is the objectives that were on the slides that we were just talking about, where you take the hypotheses and translate them into an objective for each set of hypotheses. Is that more clear?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Okay, cool. The terminology gets sticky, and I think that's a big issue. So I don't want to confuse you with what I used to call the thesis statement, but the thesis statement is, you guys should be more familiar with just from issues, right? So we write thesis statements kind of at the beginning of a paper, and it has the same principle here as well. So that's why I've changed to calling it a thesis statement, and we're keeping the objective specific to our study. So thesis statement is specific to the lit review. Objective is specific to our study.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. This is confusing. This is a process, guys. It's a whole new skill. So please ask questions as needed. I don't have any writing workshops organized for this week, but I do have 2 workshops organized for next week as we move into turning in part 1. So, all right, Eric, I thought you had your hand up. Are you good or you have a question?
I'm all good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Are you going to be posting the 3 hypotheses anywhere so that we can like look at them and so we can reformat them?
Yeah, so I'm recording this stuff and I'll post this link when
Okay.
we get done. It'll probably won't be till after 5 though.
Got it.
Awesome. Okay, guys, so that's all we've got today. Thanks for hanging in there. Good job on the hard work that you're doing. Keep in mind, 3 things due this week: the comprehension quiz of the big writing assignment, the hypotheses and objectives assignment, and this what do I call it? Pre-part 1 assignment. I'll do Friday by end of day. Sweet. Okay. We will see you guys later.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.